Carla's fitness journey started innocently enough. I remember the exact day she told me she'd joined that upscale gym downtown. It was one of those mornings where the coffee barely kicked in and the sunlight crept through the blinds just enough to remind you that it's a brand new day. She waltzed into the kitchen, excited, talking about the membership, the fancy trainers, and the high-tech equipment like it was some kind of dream come true. I was happy for her. Heck, I even encouraged it. Everyone deserves to feel good about themselves, right? For the first few weeks, everything seemed fine. She was energetic, enthusiastic, and determined. It was almost contagious. I even took on more chores to give her time for her workouts. I figured it was my way of showing support. At the time, I didn't realize I was setting the stage for something much bigger, something that would test every ounce of patience and resilience I had. The changes started small. She began obsessing over meal prep. Suddenly, our fridge was stocked with kale, quinoa, and a million different powders I couldn't pronounce. Our usual Friday pizza nights turned into discussions about macros and detoxes. I went along with it, even joking about how her green sludge smoothies smelled like a science experiment gone wrong. But the jokes didn't land anymore. Carla was too focused, too intense. It wasn't about us anymore. It was about her. And then came the mirror phase. You'd think our house had turned into a department store fitting room with the amount of time she spent in front of her reflection. It wasn't just about seeing progress. It was about perfecting every detail. The right lighting, the right angles, the right outfits. I'll never forget the day she spent 2 hours trying to take the perfect gym selfie for Instagram. 2 hours for a picture. I shrugged it off, thinking, she's proud of her progress. Let her have her moment. But those moments turned into hours, and those hours turned into entire weekends where her focus was on her phone, her progress pictures, and the endless stream of compliments from her new online followers. One Friday night, I suggested we watch a movie. A simple thing, like we used to do. She scoffed. "Dave, I don't have time to sit around. I have goals to crush." I laughed nervously, thinking she was kidding. She wasn't. That's when I realized something had shifted. It wasn't just about fitness anymore. It was about proving something. Though I still couldn't figure out what or to whom. The real turning point came one morning while I was nursing my coffee, still groggy from a restless night. Carla walked in, looking like she was ready to conquer the world in her neon workout gear. Out of nowhere, she said, "I deserve more in life." I thought she was talking about a promotion or maybe some big dream I didn't know about. Then she dropped the bomb. "This marriage is holding me back, Dave. I'm filing for divorce." I laughed, thinking it was one of those moments where she'd say, "Gotcha." But her face was stone cold. No humor, no hesitation. Just cold, hard determination. I asked her what she meant, and her response hit me like a freight train. "I've outgrown this," she said, gesturing around as if she was talking about an outdated piece of furniture. "This house, this routine, this... you." I couldn't believe it. After 5 years together, 3 of them married, this is where we ended up? I was just a phase she outgrew? A stepping stone on her path to what, exactly? Some Instagram influencer lifestyle where kale and compliments replace the foundation of a real relationship? That morning marked the beginning of the end. Or maybe it was the beginning of something else entirely. I didn't know it then, but her words, "I deserve more," would echo in my mind long after she walked out the door with her gym bag, leaving her half-empty smoothie glass on the counter as if it was some kind of metaphor for the emptiness she'd left behind. I sat there for hours, trying to make sense of it all. How did we get here? Where did it all go wrong? But no amount of reflection could prepare me for what was coming next. Carla was just getting started, and I was about to find out how far she was willing to go to chase this new version of herself. That was the first crack in the life we'd built together. And let me tell you, the cracks only got wider. After that bombshell morning, everything about Carla changed. It wasn't just the way she looked at me, like I was some relic from her past. It was her whole demeanor. She walked through the house with an air of detachment, like she was already packing her life into boxes, mentally checking out of our marriage while I was still trying to figure out what went wrong. The Carla I married was gone, replaced by someone I barely recognized. At first, I thought maybe this was a phase. Maybe she was having a midlife crisis or some kind of identity shift. People go through things, right? I gave her space, hoping she'd come back to her senses. But the space I gave her just seemed to create a bigger gap between us. It wasn't long before she started staying out late. "Jim," she'd say, her tone flat and devoid of the warmth that used to make me feel like I mattered. Sometimes she'd throw in, "Grabbing a bite with some friends," as if that made it better. But I wasn't stupid. The gym doesn't close at midnight, and friendships don't grow overnight. Something was up. Her phone became her lifeline. It was always in her hand, always buzzing with notifications. She'd scroll through Instagram like her life depended on it, her face lighting up every time another like or comment rolled in. "You're glowing." Such an inspiration. Living your best life. The compliments poured in, fueling her ego. Meanwhile, I was sitting on the couch, invisible. One night, I decided to scroll through my own social media. I wasn't looking for anything in particular, just trying to distract myself. That's when I noticed it. Every picture of us was gone. Our wedding photos, anniversary posts, vacations, all erased. It was as if I'd been deleted from her life entirely. Instead, her page was filled with carefully curated selfies, gym videos, and captions like, "New chapter, who this?" and redefining me. It felt like a slap in the face. She didn't even have the decency to tell me she was rewriting her narrative. It was like our marriage had been a placeholder, something she could wipe clean when it no longer fit her image. And the likes and comments? They were proof she had an audience cheering her on, completely unaware, or maybe unconcerned, about the destruction she was leaving behind. Then came the overheard phone call. I wasn't eavesdropping, I swear. I was getting ready for work while she was in the kitchen, talking to someone in that fake sugary voice she used when she wanted something. "I just feel so free now," she said, pausing to giggle. "He doesn't even get it. He's stuck in the past." That was the moment it all clicked. Carla wasn't just leaving me. She was shedding me like old skin. In her eyes, I was the anchor holding her back from her best life. She was free now, or at least that's what she wanted to believe. But free to do what? Chase likes? Reinvent herself as some Instagram fitness queen? It all felt so hollow. The worst part? I wasn't even angry, yet. I was hurt, confused, blindsided. I'd supported her through this fitness journey, taken on extra chores, even encouraged her to pursue her goals. And this was my reward? Being discarded like yesterday's trash? But here's the thing about being blindsided. Once you get over the initial shock, something shifts. That hurt? It starts to harden. The confusion? It gets replaced by clarity. And the sadness? Well, it turns into something else entirely. Resolve. Carla thought she had me figured out. She thought I'd roll over, take the divorce papers, and let her walk away with everything. But she underestimated me. If she wanted out, fine. But she wasn't going to steamroll me in the process. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The cracks in our marriage had become a full-blown chasm, and Carla was already building her bridge to the other side. But what she didn't realize was that I was already laying the groundwork to ensure she wouldn't get there unscathed. If she wanted a fight, she'd get one. And I was just getting started. It didn't take long for Carla's newfound confidence to spiral into something uglier. At first, it was subtle. The late nights, the endless gym selfies, the smug way she'd strut around the house like she was the next big thing. But as the weeks rolled on, it became clear she wasn't just building a new identity. She was building a fantasy. And fantasies have a way of crumbling under reality. Her relationship with Justin, the personal trainer, went from whispered rumors to blatant spectacle. The guy was everything you'd expect. Perfectly tanned, always in a tank top, and about as deep as a kiddie pool. I caught on to their connection pretty quickly. She didn't even try to hide it. One evening, she came home glowing, her face lit up like a kid on Christmas morning. "Justin says I'm the strongest I've ever been," she announced, not even looking in my direction. "Strongest, huh?" I wanted to ask if he was talking about her deadlifts or her ability to pretend she wasn't wrecking our marriage, but I bit my tongue. Soon, Justin's name started slipping into casual conversation. "Justin recommended this protein powder. Justin's taking me to this new vegan place. Justin said I should try hot yoga." It was like she was name-dropping him to get a reaction out of me. And yeah, it worked. It pissed me off. But more than that, it made me see her for who she'd become. Someone desperate for validation, even if it came from a guy whose main talent was flexing in front of a mirror. Then the sightings started. Friends would text me, "Hey, isn't Carla still married to you?" Because I just saw her holding hands with some gym bro at the smoothie bar. At first, I didn't believe it. But then I saw the pictures. Carla and Justin, laughing, touching, acting like they were the Instagram couple of the year. The first time I confronted her about it, she didn't even flinch. She just looked at me with this detached expression, like I was some annoying fly buzzing around her perfect new life. "Just so you know," she said, her tone casual, "Justin and I are dating now. I think it's time you accept that." Accept it? Oh, I accepted it all right. I accepted that my wife had turned into someone I didn't recognize. Someone who thought she could blow up our life, flaunt her affair, and still come out on top. She'd already mentally divorced me, so what did it matter to her if she added a public affair to her resume? But here's the kicker. Justin wasn't just some rebound. The guy had a reputation. My lawyer Steve did some digging, absolute legend by the way, and found out Justin was a professional homewrecker. He'd done this twice before. Find a married woman, pump her up with compliments, make her feel invincible, and ride the wave until it wasn't convenient anymore. Carla, of course, thought she was different. "Justin's not like other guys," she'd gush to her friends. But I knew better. The guy wasn't in it for love. He was in it for the hustle. And Carla, with her newfound diva complex, was the perfect mark. The cracks in their relationship started to show soon enough. Justin's over-the-top personality began clashing with Carla's growing entitlement. I overheard her on the phone one night yelling, "I deserve better than your baggage, Justin." The irony was almost too much to handle. Here she was, building her empire with a guy who had less stability than a house of cards. Meanwhile, Carla's confidence was turning into arrogance. She started dressing like she was auditioning for a reality show. Tight dresses, sky-high heels, makeup caked on like a bad wedding cake. She wasn't just living her truth. She was performing it. And the audience? Social media. Every post was another desperate grab for attention. Living my best life. No more holding back. She's not a wife anymore. She's a force of nature. But behind the filters and captions, I could see the cracks forming. She didn't have a plan. She didn't have a backup. She was banking on Justin, on this fantasy she'd built around their connection. And when that fantasy started to unravel, so did she. I'll admit, part of me enjoyed watching it happen. Call it petty, but there's a certain satisfaction in seeing someone who tried to destroy you face the consequences of their own actions. Carla thought she was untouchable, but she was about to learn the hard way that empires built on lies don't last long. And me? I wasn't just standing by. I was preparing, gathering evidence, working with Steve, and making sure that when the time came, I'd be ready. Carla thought she had me beat. She had no idea what was coming. Court day. I woke up that morning with a mix of nerves and determination. This wasn't just about splitting assets or arguing over who got what. This was about the truth. The unvarnished, undeniable truth about Carla and everything she'd done to dismantle our marriage while parading herself as the victim. When I arrived at the courthouse with Steve, my lawyer, He carried a binder so thick it could have doubled as a doorstop. He'd been working tirelessly for weeks, compiling evidence that left no room for misinterpretation. Meanwhile, across the room, Carla sat with her lawyer, visibly tense. She didn't have that diva strut anymore. No designer blazers, no smug grin. Just a hollow look, like she was finally realizing this wasn't going to go the way she'd planned. The hearing began with Carla's lawyer spinning a sob story that could have been ripped straight from a bad Lifetime movie. According to them, Carla was a long-suffering wife, emotionally drained by my lack of support for her personal growth. They painted her as a victim, a woman who had no choice but to seek happiness elsewhere. I sat there, biting my tongue, letting them dig their own hole. Then it was Steve's turn. He started methodically, laying out the facts like a master surgeon cutting through Carla's web of lies. First, he presented evidence that I'd gone above and beyond to support her fitness journey. There were text messages where I offered to make her healthy meals, suggested we do couples fitness classes, and encouraged her to follow her goals. I'd even adjusted my work schedule to handle more chores around the house so she could have more time to work out. But it wasn't just about what I'd done. Steve also showed the court what Carla had been doing behind my back. He read aloud emails and texts where she ridiculed me to her friends, calling me boring and dead weight. She had even referred to me as her backup plan in one particularly damning message. Backup plan. Can you imagine hearing that about yourself? It hit hard, but I kept my composure. Then Steve dropped the financial bombshell. He presented bank statements showing how Carla had drained our joint account. Luxury spa days, designer clothes, $200 dinners while I was eating leftovers at home. She wasn't just neglecting our marriage. She was funding her fantasy life at my expense. Carla's lawyer tried to object, claiming the spending was part of her self-care, but the judge wasn't buying it. The real nail in the coffin came when Steve unveiled the journal entry. Carla had written about her master plan to leave me, take everything she could in the divorce, and use the settlement money to fund her new life with Justin. As the judge read those words, you could feel the air leave the room. Carla sat there, her face pale, her polished nails drumming nervously against the table. But Steve wasn't done. He shifted focus to Justin. Oh, Justin. The judge learned all about his history of manipulating married women, encouraging them to leave their husbands, and then vanishing once the money ran dry. Steve even brought in testimony from one of Justin's previous victims, a woman who described how he'd used her in the same way he was using Carla. The look on Carla's face was priceless. For all her talk about being different and special, she was just another mark in Justin's con game. By the time Steve finished, Carla's lawyer looked like he wanted to crawl under the table. The judge didn't even bother hiding his irritation. He turned to Carla and said, "Mrs. Patterson, your claims lack credibility. The evidence shows a clear pattern of manipulation and financial irresponsibility on your part. This court cannot and will not reward such behavior." The ruling was swift and brutal. The house was mine, outright. Carla was ordered to reimburse me for the funds she'd drained from our accounts. Every penny. As for her emotional compensation claim, denied. Completely. The judge even called it baseless. Steve had prepared for this moment, but even he looked a little surprised by how decisively we'd won. As we left the courtroom, Carla trailed behind her lawyer, her shoulders slumped. She didn't look like the confident, Instagram-famous diva she'd tried to become. She looked like someone who just realized the cost of her lies was far greater than she'd ever imagined. I walked out with Steve, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. For months, Carla had made me feel like I was the problem, like I was the one holding her back. But today, the truth came out. And the truth was clear. Carla wasn't a victim. She was the architect of her own downfall. Justice, they say, is blind. But today, it felt like it had 20/20 vision. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe again. This wasn't just a win, it was validation. a reminder that I wasn't the one who broke us. That was all Carla. After the court's ruling, Carla's life began unraveling at an astonishing speed. The fallout from her choices hit her like a tidal wave, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. Gone was the confident, self-assured woman who had strutted through life as if the world owed her something. What remained was a shadow of the person I once knew, someone grasping at the remnants of her carefully curated facade. It started with the house. The judge's decision had been crystal clear. The house was mine. She had 30 days to pack up her things and leave. At first, she tried to stall, claiming she needed more time to figure things out. But I wasn't having it. You had plenty of time to figure things out while you were busy draining our bank account and parading Justin around, I told her bluntly. For once, she didn't have a snappy comeback. Over the next few weeks, I watched her pack. The designer luggage she used to flaunt as a status symbol now carried the weight of her mistakes. She moved slowly, almost aimlessly, as if delaying the inevitable. Every now and then, she'd glance at me, but I kept my distance. I wasn't going to make this any easier for her. She'd made her bed. Now she had to lie in it. When moving day finally came, Carla didn't have the entourage of friends she might have expected. Instead, a single friend showed up with an old, beat-up car to help her haul away the last of her things. Watching her load those bags into the car, I couldn't help but feel a sense of poetic justice. She'd built her empire on lies and manipulation, and now she was driving away from it with nothing but regret in the trunk. But her troubles didn't end there. Without access to my income or the marital funds she'd been siphoning, Carla was left scrambling to make ends meet. Her Instagram followers, the ones who had once hyped her up with comments like, "You're glowing," and "living your best life," began to dwindle. The truth about her affair with Justin and the court's ruling had started to circulate among our mutual acquaintances. People weren't as eager to rally around her anymore. Desperate for cash, Carla tried selling off her designer clothes and handbags. At first, it seemed to work. She managed to offload a few items to people who still believed in her living my truth narrative. But it wasn't enough. She began borrowing money from friends, spinning sob stories about how she'd been wronged and was just trying to get back on her feet. Those who initially lent her money grew tired of her antics quickly, especially when they realized she had no intention or ability to pay them back. As for Justin, he disappeared as swiftly as he'd entered her life. It started with missed calls and unanswered texts. Then, one day, she discovered he'd blocked her on social media. The guy who had been her partner in this delusional new life had moved on to another target, a younger, flashier client who wasn't tied up in legal battles and financial ruin. Carla was devastated. She'd bet everything on him, and he'd left her with nothing. I'd be lying if I said it didn't feel satisfying to watch her crumble. After everything she'd put me through, seeing her face the consequences of her actions felt like justice. But it was also a sobering reminder of how far she'd fallen. This was a woman who once held her head high, who had dreams and ambitions. Now she was just lost. One night, about 2 weeks after she moved out, Carla showed up at my doorstep. She looked nothing like the polished, glamorous version of herself she used to project. Her hair was messy, her clothes wrinkled, and her eyes tired. "Dave," she said softly, her voice cracking, "can we talk?" I stepped outside, closing the door behind me. "What do you want, Carla?" She hesitated, wringing her hands. I wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything. I made mistakes, big ones. I let Justin manipulate me. I got caught up in this fantasy, and I ruined everything. Her words sounded rehearsed, but the desperation in her eyes was real. She wasn't here out of genuine remorse. She was here because she had nowhere else to go. "I don't know what you expect me to say," I replied, my tone calm but firm. "You made your choices. You chose Justin. You tried to take everything from me. Now you're dealing with the fallout." Tears welled up in her eyes, spilling down her cheeks. "Can't we at least be civil? Maybe Start over? I have nothing, Dave. I'm lost. I stared at her, feeling nothing but resolve. Carla, I gave you everything. My support, my trust, my love. And you threw it all away. You don't get to come back now and ask for a second chance. That's not how this works. She broke down, sobbing on my porch. For a moment, I stood there, watching her crumble. Then, without a word, I stepped back inside and closed the door, leaving her to face the reality she'd created. Carla had burned every bridge in her life, and now she was standing alone in the ashes. It was a harsh lesson, but one she'd brought upon herself. And me? For the first time in months, I felt free, truly free, to move on. It was late one evening when Carla reappeared at my door. I hadn't seen her in weeks, and truth be told, I didn't expect to see her again. After everything she'd done, after all the bridges she'd burned, what could possibly bring her back? But there she was, standing in the dim glow of the porch light, looking as though life had finally caught up with her. "Dave," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. She clutched her arms across her chest, not in the confident, defensive way she used to, but in a way that made her seem small, vulnerable. I opened the door but didn't step aside to let her in. "What do you want, Carla?" She hesitated, looking down at her feet like a child caught doing something wrong. I need to talk to you, please." Against my better judgment, I stepped outside, closing the door behind me. I wasn't going to let her back into my home, or my life, without a damn good reason. "Talk," I said, folding my arms. Her eyes welled up with tears almost immediately. "I'm sorry, Dave, for everything, for how I treated you, for what I did to our marriage. I know I've made mistakes, big ones. I don't know what I was thinking." I leaned back against the doorframe, keeping my expression neutral. I wasn't about to make this easy for her. "Oh, you knew exactly what you were thinking, Carla. You thought you could have it all, Justin, the house, my money. You thought you could walk away and leave me in the dust while you lived your best life. So forgive me if I'm not exactly moved by your sudden epiphany." Her tears started falling in earnest then, streaking her face and making her look even more disheveled than when she arrived. "I got caught up in something, in this fantasy. Justin made me believe I deserved more, that I could have this perfect life. But it wasn't real. None of it was real. He used me." I couldn't help but laugh bitterly. "Welcome to the club. He used you, you used me, and now you're here. Why, Carla? What do you want from me?" She wiped her eyes with the sleeve of her sweatshirt, a stark contrast to the designer outfits she used to parade around in. "I don't know where else to go," she admitted, her voice breaking. "I've lost everything. The house, the money, my friends, even Justin's gone. I'm lost, Dave. I don't know how to fix this." Her admission hung in the air between us. I could feel a part of me softening. Old habits, maybe. After all, this was the woman I'd loved, the woman I'd built a life with. But another part of me, the part that remembered every cruel word, every betrayal, every sleepless night, kept me grounded. "You can't fix this," I said finally, my tone flat. "You can't undo the damage you caused. You made your choices, Carla. You walked away. You don't get to come back now just because your fantasy fell apart." Her face crumpled, and she sank down onto the porch step, burying her face in her hands. "I don't know what to do," she sobbed. "I don't know how to start over." I watched her for a moment, feeling nothing but a strange sense of detachment. The woman sitting on my porch wasn't the Carla I'd married. She wasn't even the Carla who'd torn through my life like a wrecking ball. She was a hollow shell, a reminder of what happens when you build your life on lies and arrogance. "You figure it out?" I said finally. "The same way I had to figure it out when you left me. You pick yourself up and you deal with it. But you do it without me." Her sobs grew louder, but I didn't flinch. I didn't reach out to comfort her, didn't tell her it was going to be okay. Because it wasn't my job anymore. She'd forfeited that when she walked out the door the first time. After a few minutes, I stepped back toward the door. "I think you should go," I said, my voice firm but not unkind. "There's nothing for you here anymore, Carla. I hope you figure it out, but I'm done." She looked up at me, her face streaked with tears, desperation written all over her features. "Dave, please, can't we at least—" I cut her off. "We can't. Goodbye, Carla." I stepped back inside and closed the door, leaning against it for a moment as I listened to her sobbing on the other side. Eventually, I heard her footsteps retreat, the sound of her car starting, and then silence. That was the last time I saw her. And as painful as it was to watch someone I once loved fall apart, I knew I'd made the right choice. Carla had made her bed, and now she had to lie in it. Alone. After Carla left that night, I sat in the quiet of my house, the same house that had once echoed with arguments, laughter, and the occasional hum of her blender making those kale smoothies she used to love. But this time, the silence didn't feel suffocating. It felt peaceful. For the first time in months, maybe even years, I realized I wasn't carrying the weight of Carla's ambitions, expectations, and manipulations anymore. The days that followed were oddly liberating. It was as if a storm had finally passed, leaving me with the space to rebuild. The house, now empty of Carla's presence and all her expensive clutter, felt like it was truly mine for the first time. I started making small changes, rearranging furniture, painting the walls, planting new flowers in the garden. These weren't just physical changes. They were symbolic of the new chapter I was beginning. Work became my anchor. For years, I'd poured myself into my job without thinking much about it. But now it felt like a lifeline. My coworkers, who had subtly avoided the topic of my personal life during the chaos, started inviting me out for drinks, cracking jokes, and treating me like I was part of the team again. I began to realize just how isolated I'd become during my marriage. Carla's self-absorbed pursuit of perfection had slowly pushed me away from the people who truly mattered. Social media was another beast I had to tackle. Carla's posts, her carefully curated facade of living her best life, were no longer a daily irritant. She'd gone radio silent after her empire crumbled, leaving me free to reclaim my own narrative. I debated deleting my accounts entirely, but instead, I decided to use them to reconnect with old friends, share photos of my newly redecorated house, and, for the first time in a long time, just be me. No filters, no pretense. Occasionally, I'd hear whispers about Carla. Mutual friends would mention seeing her at a coffee shop, looking disheveled and worn out. Apparently, she'd tried to rebuild her social media following. But without the glitz and glamour she once flaunted, people weren't as interested. She'd burned too many bridges, alienated too many people, and now she was facing the reality of her choices. One day I ran into a mutual acquaintance who couldn't resist giving me the latest update. "She's staying with a friend now," they said, "borrowing money from anyone who will listen to her sob story." I nodded politely, but didn't ask for more details. Carla's life wasn't my business anymore, and honestly, I didn't care to know the specifics. The only thing I cared about was moving forward. As the weeks turned into months, I began to find joy in the little things again. Cooking for one wasn't the lonely chore I'd once imagined. It became a therapeutic ritual. Watching a movie on Friday nights wasn't a compromise anymore. It was something I genuinely looked forward to. And weekends? They were mine to spend however I wanted, whether it was hiking a trail, fixing up the house, or just reading a book on the porch. I even started dating again. Nothing serious at first, just casual dinners and conversations with women who were kind, grounded, and, most importantly, drama-free. Each date reminded me that there were people out there who valued honesty and connection, not just appearances and social clout. It was refreshing, to say the least. One night, as I was sitting on the porch with a beer in hand, watching the sunset, I found myself reflecting on everything that had happened. Carla's betrayal had been a brutal lesson, but it had also been a wake-up call. I'd spent so much time trying to support someone who didn't value me that I'd forgotten to value myself. Now, I was finally learning how to do that. If there's one thing I've learned through all of this, it's that life doesn't always go the way you plan. People you trust can let you down, and the things you think are permanent can crumble in an instant. But when the dust settles, you have a choice. Let the pain define you, or use it to rebuild something stronger. I chose the latter, and as I looked out at the horizon, I couldn't help but smile. For the first time in a long time, the future felt like it was mine to shape. No Carla, no drama, just me, living my best life, one day at a time.